So we were talking about this before we got on, but the NBA offseason is just not as well organized as like the NFL's offseason, where like there's something to do every month. And it makes generating content about it like a lot more difficult because they're like, with Summer League kind of already happened. We're in this real dead period where there's like FIBA, but the Cavs don't have anybody playing FIBA, and that's only every 4 years. And the USA team's like bad. Like, I don't know if they're bad, but like this is a far
They're
cry
pretty
from like
mid,
the
though.
Redeem team. Yeah.
Yeah, this is a mid group of players.
Like, I don't know if you would think the USA team, if they just like played in the NBA, if they would be championship favorites. It depends on what conference, if they could get out the West. Like, I don't know if they're getting out the West. I don't think they're getting out the East.
No, I don't think so either. I mean, we were going through it. It's a little bleak, and I don't know how many guys. It seems like a lot of guys said no is what happened. Like when we were originally talking about it, thought maybe someone like Darius would be really fun to see on this team. Feels like he probably said no. Donovan, I think I read somewhere that he said no. So it seems like quite a few guys just kind of passed on it. I also think over the years, like basketball has started to really expand internationally in a way that it didn't used to. So you're finding a lot more guys on international teams that play in the NBA, which I think is good for the game and just like spreading the game in general. But definitely different, I would say, from like 15, 20 years ago, from how much more focused it was on the US team.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think also since the US is like, since pretty much what, '04, really, since the Dream Team, they're used to dominating so much. It's kind of an afterthought of like, oh,
Mm-hmm.
do we really got to send our best players to win this thing? We'll be good without it. And they might be good without it, even though I don't think they won the last FIBA, did they?
I don't think so. Well, let's see.
Because it's not as simple as just like winning the game in the tournament that you're in. It's like this. It's like kind of like the FIFA tournament, right? Where it's like a round robin round, and then there's like
Right.
qualifying things, and then you can lose and it's eliminated. It's very hard to follow too for a lot of Americans.
I think they did win in 2019. Oh, no, Spain.
Spain won.
MVP, Ricky Rubio.
You never know too, because in those tournaments, like the names, we overvalue the names we recognize. But like one of the things we don't value in those like FIBA tournaments is like some of these dudes that you've never heard of that have been on like the Spain team or the Serbian team. Well, they've been playing with each other forever. So
Yeah,
they might be able to put together like 4 good quarters of basketball in an elimination tournament to beat them. It's not like the NBA where you get 7 games and everything like that.
right.
So it's going to be a little bit more difficult for the U.S. to win that. But we thought Darius was going to play in that. Maybe that'd be some interesting thing to watch. No, nope. So what we've landed on is we're going to talk about Summer League because we didn't talk about that yet. The U.S. might not have won the last FIFA World Cup, but we did. The Cavs did bring home the chip. They did have a championship to celebrate. They
Oh,
were the
good.
Summer League champions. Amani Bates looked really good. I forget. Sam Harrell is his name, I think.
And
He looked.
Merrill.
Sam Merrill
Yeah.
is his. He looked pretty good. Anybody else stand out to you during the Summer League that you felt like, hey, he might be able to push for some time during the regular season?
Yeah, I think two other people other than the two you mentioned there stood out to me. Craig Porter Jr., I thought looked like a decent backup point guard. And I just mentioned Ricky Rubio. I'm sure everyone has seen recently that he said he's kind of taken a step back from basketball for the time being to focus on his mental health. So hope everything is good with him. But I think that does leave open some questions on what the Cavs backup point guard situation is going to be. And I liked what I saw from Craig Porter Jr. And I just wonder in that case if they start going the younger route rather than a veteran player, because I think you brought in Ricky originally to be that veteran presence for Darius Garland, to be like, hey, Darius, going to show you the ropes, show you how things go. And Darius was able to learn a lot from Ricky. I kind of feel like Darius is a little bit more ready now and doesn't need that as much. And they might go, a route of a guy that they really think should be young, develop, and be able to step in when needed. So I think Craig Porter Jr. could be interesting for that. And then obviously the other impressive player in it was Isaiah Mobley, the MVP of the championship game. Really looked great in that title game, especially 28 points. And in general, his stats I was looking at compared to 2022 Summer League, he averaged 8.8 points per game in the 2022 Summer League in his 5 games. This year, 17.8 points he averaged. So a lot of improvement, and he just looked more comfortable, and that he really felt good out there. And it was just fun to see, and fun to see Evan posting about it, like celebrating his brother's MVP win. And I felt like he was kind of the biggest standout, I would say, from all of Summer League.
Yeah, that's one where the older brother, little brother dynamics kind of thrown off a bit because Evan's the younger one, right?
Yeah.
And it's one of the things I think about all the time with this team is how young they are. And sometimes we lose sight of the actual timeline and we want things right now, right? We want more help. We want bench help. We want bench depth. We want a backup center. We want it now because this team's not in a terrible position. But they're kind of like where the Denver Nuggets were when they drafted Michael Porter Jr., right? Where it's like, okay, we're trying to figure some things out. We still don't know who the best player on this team is. We have a bunch of really talented players. We've acquired a ton of guys. But right now it's like, okay, we're trying to figure out which piece is going to land here. We still don't know who's supposed to be the best player on this core, right? We debate it every day. Is it going to be Darius Garland? Is it going to be Evan Mobley? Is it going to still be Donovan Mitchell? Like, who's going to be that guy? And one of the guys who've been getting more kind of credit in this area that I think might deserve it because he showed up out of all three of the guys we talked about being in the court. This is the one that showed up in the playoffs the most. And that's Darius Garland. And we've talked about what happens if Donovan Mitchell becomes a top 5 player and is the best player on this team. We talked about what happens if Evan Mobley develops into that. One of the things we have not talked about is what happens if this is Darius Garland that steps up into the role. It becomes the best player on this team by far, because if you look at the improvement every year, he's gotten significantly better. I think rookie year to second year, obvious, second to third, obvious, and third to fourth, I think is obvious. He was so much more efficient this year than he was last year. What do you see in Darius? And what do you think it means if he becomes a Chris Paul-like figure on this team for everybody else? Do you think that's the best case scenario? Because I can make the argument it is.
Yeah. Well, first of all, it's interesting the improvement that you mentioned he has made each year, because I feel like that's so rare to have that drastic of an improvement every single year. And I think the smallest was probably from 2 seasons ago to this past season, but it's because he had already raised to like, a high level talent, all-star level talent. Like that's kind of where he had gotten to. That the room you have to grow at that point is a lot smaller, but he really year over year has made a ton of growth. It's hard for me to see him being the best player with Donovan Mitchell still on this roster, because I do still think that they're just based on regular season performance too. I know playoffs was a little different. There was still a pretty decent gap between them. But just because Donovan Mitchell was like playing out of his mind for a decent part of the season, where it was like something we really haven't seen in a while in a Cavs uniform. So I'm not sure if I see with Donovan Mitchell still being here. But that is also up for debate. Will Donovan Mitchell still be here in, a couple of seasons? And if, the case is that he leaves, does Darius kind of rise up to be that best player? I think he definitely does have it in him based on the improvements he's made and what we saw in the playoffs and his ability to take over a game if he wants to. He did do that. And I think game 2, was that the one that we won? That he performed extremely well. So I think it's possible. I'm just not sure if I see that being the realistic case with Donovan Mitchell on the roster.
It's interesting to me with Darius because he's the one player on this team that's kind of put in the odd spot by Donovan Mitchell being there, because Donovan Mitchell's always going to take more shots than him. But what Darius has gotten good at, it's not just that he's gotten better. It's that he's gotten better at all the things he wasn't good at. And I think that is a rare trait, right? Because some guys improve. Some guys go from good shooters to great shooters, right? Stephen Curry, good shooter always, turned into a great shooter and became a great dribbler. But the rare cases are the ones that like turn these things that were he was horrible at playmaking his first 2 years in the NBA. He was horrible at finishing around the rim, right? And he has gotten so much better at those two things and then also has improved as a shooter. It makes me wonder what else can he add to his repertoire once he's done just getting those things that he wasn't good at proficient, which he's already gotten to. What else can he add? Because he seems to have this accelerated ability to improve to his game. And he's one of those players where it's hard to imagine him being the best player because he's not the biggest dude. He wasn't the earliest drafted dude. He wasn't the most hyped guy in college. He barely played in college. We barely knew who Darius Garland was when he got drafted here. And he was always like the other guy to Colin Sexton, right? And then he becomes the guy, and then Donovan Mitchell, and he's always kind of seen as the other guy. So it's hard to kind of see him as that. But if you look at trajectories, one of the issues with Evan Mobley, and I think Evan's going to develop into a great, great player, but one of the things is some of the stuff he's not been good at, he hasn't really improved that stuff as rapidly as you would want him to at this point, right? Like some of the mishandling, the dribble stuff, some of the comfort in the post that you just want to see him get there. Some of that's just him getting bigger. Some of that is just him being more comfortable. And you want to see those things for Evan. But you've seen Darius take these things and develop. Now, again, Darius is in his fourth year. Evan's in his second. Look where Darius was in his second compared to where Evan is in his second. So you could say the same thing. Well, the thing I'm saying is if Darius keeps developing, that's going to be good for Evan Mobley. That's going to be good for everybody on this roster because Darius has this ability to take over a game offensively if he needs to, be the main shot creator, but also to get everybody else involved. And sometimes when your best player is Donovan Mitchell, sometimes this happens where he loses track of the flow of the game. He's not shooting well. He's taking too many shots. He's taking too many dribble drives, and not enough people are getting their hands on the ball. The defense gets lethargic because there's not enough energy going around, and that's a problem. When Darius Garland is your best player, I think that raises your floor because you get more out of your role players. You get more out of guys like Evan Mobley. You're ultimately going to get more out of your bench players too. And I think that Darius is somebody who's interesting to watch because he's just continued to grow. He continues to surprise us. And I wouldn't say that I would expect him to be the best player on the team in a couple of years. But I'm not going to say that I'm going to be surprised by it because I've been surprised by Darius Garland almost every year of his career.
Right. For sure. And I think part of why I have a hard time seeing him be the best player with Donovan Mitchell is kind of what you were saying about like Darius's style of play. He is a facilitator. He has talked about how his instinct is to pass and not to shoot. It's almost similar to the way LeBron has talked about his game, even though LeBron is like statistically the best shooter of all time. But Darius has kind of talked about that where that's how he prefers to play his game and what he feels like he excels at. So I don't know if mentally he's ever going to be the guy who's going to want to be taking, the most shots and those kinds of things, which is fine. And I think you can still be, a star player and be that type of player. It's just a different way of playing the game in general. That is going to be super different to someone like Donovan Mitchell, whose instinct is always going to be to shoot first.
Mm-hmm. And I think also I really like what I saw with game 2, game 4. I think the game 4 was the one where he tried his best. We just couldn't get a rebound on the other hand, right? But he tried his best to bring the Cavs back into that game. I think he got them back within like 2 or 4 by the start of the fourth quarter, but we just got outlasted in New York. And it's like, okay, that's the thing that surprised me. It was like, hey, when it was time, when the back was against the wall, when Donovan wasn't playing well, Evan's not having a good game, Jarrett is in the sunken place. Who's gonna step up? And it ended up being Darius Garland. I think we should listen when the team speaks like that because it's like, hey, Darius is the one that stepped up in that moment. I'm wondering if that's going to be a signal of a change when it comes to these crunch time situations, because it was one of the things we talked about during the regular season. Sometimes these crunch time situations can get iffy because it was like, is it Donovan? Is it Darius? I wouldn't be surprised if it got like that again, because it's going to be a question of like, hey, I know it's Donovan most of the time, but like, I don't know. In the playoffs, it was Darius. Like, those kind of things affect guys. So I'm interested to see that dynamic in play with Darius and Donovan as they both continue to grow.
Yeah.
I wonder if they're going to outgrow each other.
Yeah, I also think what made them end up working so well was really the responsibility of Darius, because he's like such a flexible person to play with. Like most guys would probably not just be able to have Donovan Mitchell come in on their team and work as well as they did. But Darius's flexibility and his ability to adapt his game to other people, I think, was the reason that it was able to end up working at the end of the day.
And his ability to just identify like, hey, look, his shots ain't dropping. I need to do something.
Right.
like somebody
He sees
needs to do
the game
something.
well.
Yeah. And he kind of feels it out well. And that's one of the things with Donovan. Donovan doesn't feel it as well, I think, as Darius does, because sometimes Donovan can get so lost into his plan that he kind of loses track of where they're at in the game. Because there's sometimes you're like, Donovan, I need you to be more aggressive. We're down 10 on the road. Like, I need you to start taking shots. Or he takes a bunch of shots and you're like, we don't need this right now at this point. Right. We just need to keep pick and rolling and just smashing with Evan and Jarrett. But one of the reasons I brought up the Denver Nuggets timeline is a lot of these role players that we want, right? The backup center, the small forward, the bench scorer, right? They probably played in the summer league, right? They're probably really young on this roster. And who knows, Sam Merrill might turn out to be like a spot up shooter that's like really important to this team down the line. Who knows, Amani Bates might develop into somebody who's really, he might be the Michael Porter to this offense if they could get something like that, right? There's so much around this team, and I stress this, because we talk about this Cavs team as if what they did against the Knicks is their peak. It was just their entry point. And they have so much more room to grow. And this core is going to change so much from what it is now. That Denver Nuggets team that won the championship team this year, very different than the bubble Denver Nuggets team that went to the Western Conference finals, right? And that's just talking about 2 years on a team that was pretty much built at that point. Jokic was 25? Evan Mobley's not 25, and he's not going to be 25 for another 3 years. So we're 3 years away from being that. That's why I say, like, when they got Michael Porter, that's kind of where we're at. We're like, hey, we're going to be a decent team for a while. It's going to be frustrating because this team's going to hit their head against the wall, because some of the hurdles that they need to overcome aren't going to be overcome by money or trades. Like, some of this just has to be aged out of. Some of this is just Evan's got to be a bigger person. Like, just physically a bigger person, right? Right. So
I think, that is the hard part about this team. And I think we talked about this, I don't know if it was the last episode we did, but just in how there's not like these big changes that need to be made. The guys we have just have to get better at what we need them to get better at, which is sometimes a hard thing to say as a fan, because you just have to kind of wait for it and see if it happens. And if they're able to develop those things. Like, I know people have a lot of parts of Evan's game that they want to see develop, and it's just kind of a matter of waiting and seeing, like, we think he can get there. He has that potential to get there. Is he going to get there? And then, once you see that, do you decide when to give up on it, or when, hey, we feel like he's hit that point and is going to be this guy that we need him to be? So it's a lot of patience in that kind of process.
It's a lot of patience. And it's also like, the reason you can't rush the process is, let's say Evan Mobley becomes the best player on this team in 5 years. We can't build around Evan Mobley right now, though, right? Like, even if you know that right now, you can't build around him right now, because you don't know what his game's going to be like, right?
Right.
In order to build around somebody, you have to know what their game's like. And right now, we're in the stage of, hey, how good's Darius Garland going to be? What's his game really like? Like, what can we put around Darius Garland right now to make him successful? Right now, we don't know. Like, we're trying to figure that out. Maybe it's another two
Right.
guard to take some scoring pressure off of him. Maybe it's not. Maybe he does need to be the primary scorer in order to get the most out of him. We have no idea yet with Darius Garland. Same thing goes with Evan Mobley, and that's even more of a mystery bag because, like, offensively, he's very raw still, right? So
For sure.
what do you build around Evan Mobley? Defensively, we have a good idea, but offensively, I don't know. Do you need to put shooters around him? Is he somebody who needs a lot of role space? Is he somebody who needs another big there to handle some of the larger guys? Is he going to grow into his frame? Is he going to be a bigger person? Are we going to be able to put him at center? How can you build around somebody when you don't know all of that stuff about them? You know,
Right.
a lot of people want this team to go all in, but Darius Garland and Evan Mobley are the two most important pieces to this rebuild. I would say Donovan Mitchell might be the best player right now, but the Cavs' future hinges on the success of those two players going forward. Donovan Mitchell's been the best player on a team that plateaued already. Like, that's already
Right.
happened.
You know what you have in Donovan already too. Like, this is the player Donovan
And
is
you
going
know
to be
what
at
happens
best.
when
know
you
that.
build around Donovan Mitchell, which is
For sure.
you're
You've
only
seen it.
going to be but so good, right? They didn't ever get out the West. Did they ever get to a Western Conference Finals? I know they were a 1 seed, but I think they went out in the second round. There's a ceiling on how good you could be building around Donovan Mitchell. We know this. So the plan can't be, let's build around Donovan Mitchell. The plan has to be, okay, how good can we get outside of Donovan Mitchell, and can one of these other players be somebody that we can build around? Because unless that happens, you know what the ceiling is there, right? Because those were good Utah teams. You know, those were really good Utah teams, and they never were able to get where they needed to get to because Donovan Mitchell ultimately just is not enough. And people have learned that lesson. So that's where you need to be at. But right now, we don't know what Evan's going to be. We're like a year or two away, maybe, from figuring that out with Evan. We're a year or two away from figuring that out with Darius, even though he's gotten his extension, right? Like, a lot of these guys don't really hit their peak or hit where you know what their game's going to be until, what, 25, 26? LeBron took that long. He's LeBron. LeBron's game, like I tell people this all the time. Look at a game from when LeBron was 25 and look at a game from when LeBron came back when he was 27. And then look at a game when LeBron's 30. You see 3 different players.
Yeah.
Like, that's how much this stuff evolves. Building around LeBron in 2007 was not the same thing as building around him in 2013, and it's not the same thing as building around him in 2018 and to the present. So that's where I'm like, hey, it sucks. People are frustrated. It gets frustrating when the situation happens like the Knicks did in the playoffs. But that's why there needs to be patience around the Cavs' approach to improving the team, because they can't handicap themselves. Because they want to get better right now, trying to hit that ceiling that you can get with Donovan Mitchell, when that ceiling's not what you want. You want to prioritize the development of Evan Mobley and the development of Darius Garland, because this team does not become a Eastern Conference championship team without those two players stepping up significantly, specifically Evan Mobley, because he has the most growing to do there because he's the youngest player. You don't get to an NBA Finals if you're built around Donovan Mitchell. That's just not how this is going to, especially not this East, right? So that's where that's what the Cavs have to figure out. And yeah, there are things you could do. You can have a better backup center. You could give yourself a better chance. You can not put Jared Allen in a situation where he's just going to get muscled and there's nobody there to kind of tire out Mitchell Robinson throughout the game, so it's just him, so he just gets manhandled. You can put your players in better situations, but you don't want to do that at the expense of your ability to grow in the future, because this Cavs core isn't about 2022 or 2023. It's going to be about 25, 26, 27 and beyond.
Right. Well, and especially as you mentioned in the East specifically, with just how much talent is there. Obviously, we don't know what they're going to look like a couple years down the road, but with the talent and the way it looks right now, like, we do need to kind of play the long game and make sure we're developing those guys, because like you mentioned, Donovan Mitchell isn't going to be the one that's going to defeat all of these top teams that we have in the East. With how we looked currently this past season, we need those other guys to be able to develop to get where we want to go.
All right. Well, that's going to be it for this episode of Cavs Attack. We will be back next month for the preseason, because I bet you forgot that the NBA has a preseason. I don't even know if they let you watch that on League Pass. Like, is that a thing? Do they let you watch the preseason? It's such a terrible system.
I don't even know. I remember I went to a preseason game last year against the Hawks, I remember, but I don't remember if I watched any of the other ones on TV. They got to put it somewhere.
There's not much on TV anymore. Somebody could just buy the TV rights contract and put every game on national TV like they do the NFL, because like it's actually doable now. We don't. Everything else is on streaming. Like if you want to watch like a scripted sitcom or something like that, this is reality shows and sports. We might as well. Somebody might as well just put all of them on national TV so we could just watch them. But that's going to be it for the Cavs attack. Let me know what you think in the comment section down below. Who do you think is going to be the better player in the long run, Evan Mobley or Darius Garland? But y'all have a great day. Have an even better night.